Hey guys, it's Riley, first year giant pumpkin grower. Just thought I might show everybody how I whip up my seed starting mix or potting soil. Um, Actually doing a potting soil this time, up potting a couple of my plants. I've got the 1878 Van der Weilen. Want to put it into a 5-gallon pot. That plant was started on April 10th. It's April 29th today. And it needs to go into a bigger pot because I'm not going to be able to get into the ground for another few days. I like to make all my own potting mixes. That way I know what's in it. I don't have to worry about getting a hot batch. And it's kind of a tedious process, but I'm going to show you how I do it. So first thing, I start with some spring water. And I'm going to mix in some Protect for some silicone. It says it's supposed to make it drought and heat tolerant. I'm gonna do a quarter teaspoon. Just gonna rinse that off. I'm gonna mix in a little bit of CalMag Plus. Calcium for early root and shoot development should lead to a stronger stem. Help avoid some of the blossom and rot, that kind of stuff supposedly. Just shy of a teaspoon on that. I'm going to give that a little shake. I don't know if this is right or wrong, it's just my ways little tips and tricks I've picked up from other growers. Thank you everyone for sharing your videos. I'm going to add a quarter teaspoon of the WOW humic fulvic plus seaweed. Wonder blend. Give that a little mix. And we're on to the Bioworks Root Shield Plus Trichoderma. It's just supposed to help keep the plant healthy. It fights powdery mildew. It's probably the most expensive supplement I add to the regimen, but comes highly recommended, so figured I'd give it a try. Like I said, this is my first year growing giant pumpkins, so I really have no idea how it's going to turn out. The next product is called Mycogenesis. Different blend of mycorrhizae. I'll be adding this to my regular pumpkins regimen as well. I got a half teaspoon. Mostly feed the young plants a lot of microbes, less nutrients, more microbes. My seed starting mix really doesn't have any fertilizers in it at all, other than my Miracle-Gro perlite, I suppose. But now that I'm into the potting mixes, they have a little bit more fertility. My first potting mix is 1/3 peat and cocoa blend, 1/3 perlite, vermiculite, and sand, and then 1/3 Miracle-Gro potting soil plus compost, homemade compost. Right now I'm just adding some Rootwise Microbe Complete. Again, a bunch of more beneficial microbes. It's a whole blend of a bunch of different beneficials. And then on to the very popular Azos. It's a nitrogen fixing bacteria. We're going to add a teaspoon of that. Nice thing about Azos is kind of like a wettable powder. So I like to mix a little bit in with my watering in addition to putting it into the soil. one of my little tricks that I like to do is in blending my own soil, I prefer my peat moss and coco coir to be as dry as possible. And then I wet it down. I actually use my little biological mix to wet my dry ingredients. So we should be all set on the watering. So now we're going to mix together the ingredients. I wanted to do about a 4-gallon batch this time. And since this is my second potting mix, I'm actually going to be doing 25% peat cocoa, 25% cocoa vermiculite and sand, or perlite vermiculite and sand, and then 25% of the Miracle Grow potting mix and 25% of my homemade compost. So that's 1 gallon each. There's 16 cups in a gallon. So I break down the 1 gallon of each into the 16 different cups. Starting with peat moss, I'm going to do 10 cups of peat moss and 6 cups of coco coir for my blend. So I pre-measured my 10 cups of peat moss. I'm going to put that into a big mixing bin. And I'm going to start to wet that down. There's a fair amount of mixing, but I'm try to speed it up a little bit here. You gotta get some dirty hands when you make your own seed starting mix, I'll tell you that. I call it pumpkining. So it's a lot harder to guesstimate how much coco coir is going to be 6 cups. So I'm going to mix that separately, and then once it's mixed up and wetted, then I'll measure out 6 more cups of it. So I'm going to guesstimate a little over 6 cups so I don't fall short, but we'll see what happens. This is just Burpee organic seed start mix. Coco coir comes bone dry. It's another thing I really like about it, and it really gobbles up the secret water. I got my hoop houses up, 2 of them. I'm going to grow 2 competition plants this year. I'm waiting on my heating cables. There's been a big delay in getting those, which is my limiting factor at the moment. So I'm patiently waiting. I did start 3 rounds of plants. Starting on April 10th, I did 4. April 15th, I did 4. And then April 20th, I did 4. Just to give me 3 different stages of plants. The oldest one you can see back behind me here is the Van der Weilen, and then I got some of the younger ones here, the Martin. So if I need to end up just using the younger plants, then I've got that hopefully under control. They're supposed to be my backup plants, but they may end up being the main ones. All right, so I'm going to see if I got my 6 cups of cocoa here. 2. 4. Hopefully the rest of it goes a little bit faster. I pre-measured most of my other ingredients. So there's my 6. I'm going to give them a little blend. I like to blend it at each step of the way, otherwise I don't have as much confidence that it gets thoroughly mixed. So I'm going to blend in my sand. I just use play sand. Again, we're going for 1 gallon of sand plus perlite plus vermiculite. So I broke that down. I wanted to do 6 cups perlite, 6 cups vermiculite, and 4 cups of sand. So in goes the sand. Let me give that a quick mix. I did a couple of tests earlier in the year with regular perlite and Miracle-Gro perlite, and I just found that the seedlings grew much better with the Miracle-Gro perlite, and that's the only fertilization that's in my seed start mix. So I try to stick with that as much as possible. So I've got 6 cups of that here going in, and give that a quick mix. Okay. It is a lot more work than just buying a bag of potting mix or seed starting mix, but I find the results are extremely consistent from batch to batch. All of my seedlings have looked identical. I'm no expert, but they all look really good and healthy to me. So I'm gonna keep doing it this way. And then I got my 6 cups of vermiculite. And these ingredients are really just for a combination of drainage and moisture retention. I like to add sand to my mix because I actually, well, for one, I have really sandy soil, so I feel like kind of getting used to that. But really, it allows them for me to give them a nice heavy drink of water, and then they tend to dry back out again within 2 or 3 days, so I can water them a little bit more frequently, and it just gives me extra opportunities to add those beneficial microbes. And they seem to really like it, so. All right, so we got 2 of our 4 gallons. Next we're gonna do a full gallon of the Miracle-Gro potting mix. It's a moisture control cup. Again, we've got 16 cups in a gallon. So I'm just gonna measure that out. I got a 2-cup measuring cup here, so I want to also add a couple of extra things to this mix. I'm going to add some additional azos, some mycos, and some azomite. Azomite's just a blend of minerals. Make sure your plant has everything it needs. For this size batch, I'm going to do 6 tablespoons of azomite. Four tablespoons of mycos. 2 tablespoons of azos. Now I'll give that a blend. Then I'm going to check my moisture, try to get that close to the drip test where you give it a big squeeze and see if you can get a drip of water coming between your fingers. Then after that I'll add the final ingredient, which will be my homemade compost. Last year I got into hot composting and took my horse manure, mixed it with some grass clippings and some hay, watered it down, churned it every other day, watched the heat, babied it, and it was finished last summer, but I bagged up a few bags of it so it didn't freeze over the winter, just so that I could use it on my test earlier in the year. So I was actually really glad I did that. In my first round of potting soil, I will sterilize by baking my compost in the oven at like 225 degrees with some aluminum foil on it. Give it a good steam. I do it for about an hour. Even though there's a lot of beneficial microbes in there, I want to make sure that there's not a lot of competition between the mycos, the azos, the trichoderma, and all the other biologicals that I'm adding. I don't want them to be competing with the microbes that are in my homemade compost initially. I want that seed to get established with the microbes I know are there before I get a chance for the rest of the microbes to take over. Now once they get out into the ground, they're going to be exposed to the natural microbial populations that are out there, along with a lot of the compost I'm blending into their patch. So they are going to get to see a lot of these guys, which is why for this second batch of potting mix, I'm not going to be sterilizing my compost. Not everyone transplants numerous times, but I transplant from a 16-ounce cup into a 1 gallon pot, from a 1 gallon into a 2 gallon, and then into a 5 gallon. Only because I had hoped to have these plants in the ground in the next day or two, but it doesn't look like that's going to happen. So I got to get them into a bigger pot before the roots want to get all root bound and cause that plant to failure to thrive. They just don't seem to take off, from what I hear, as well if they get root bound. So I'm going to keep putting these plants into bigger and bigger pots until we can figure out who we're going to keep, who we're going to put in the ground, and when that will all be ready. So my final ingredient is a gallon of compost, and really I have 2 different batches of homemade compost plus worm castings. So I'm going to make sure I do about 6 cups of each, just shy of 6 cups of done. And this stuff is pretty dark, well cured. I know what went into it, homemade, best kind. Alright, we're ready for the final blend here before we see what kind of roots we got going on. on that Vanderweilen. Now that plant, I've been hardening off for the last 4 or 5 days, and it actually spent the night outside last night in its hoop house. I do have a little heater out there, and I actually have a much larger test practice plant that's been living out there for several days now, and it's really loving it. The only problem is my soil temp's only about 50 degrees out there right now, so I need those heat cables. But the climate above ground seems to be doing okay for me, so I'm going to start moving more and more of my test plants to start living out there for the next few days. And hopefully those heat cables will come, or I'll just have to buy another set. I'm going to get this, make sure this is nice and mixed up. And we'll see if I can flip that plant over by myself without destroying it. I don't have a lot of experience doing this stuff, so I do make some mistakes. Some of my early practice plants, I've definitely crushed them. I've had lights fall on them. I let the kids abuse some of them just to kind of see what they can handle. I purposefully make some mistakes all winter long on my test plants, just to see how they handle it. I have learned a lot, but I have a lot still to learn. And I love watching videos of other people doing stuff like this, so I figured I would make one and pay it forward a little bit. All right, so I got my potting mix. I got my 5-gallon pot. I'm gonna fill some in the bottom. And then I'm gonna make sure to put some of my azos and mycos down there. Made that mistake. You do not want to have to pull a plant back out just to put a scoop of this in, so you got to do it when the time is right. At the bottom of the hole, and then the azo should make the direct root contact if possible. Well, we'll see. And then I always like to test the height by putting the other plant in there, seeing where it'll line up. That looks okay. Some people do take the plants that are a little bit leggier and they'll bury them a little bit deeper to give them a little bit more stability. And I've done that with a lot of my plants. This is actually one of my leggier plants, this Vanderweilen. It's very vibrant. It seems like a very vigorous, strong plant, but it's kind of dainty at the same time and a little bit leggy. So it's not really one of my front runners, which is why I decided to let this one spend the night outside last night to see how it handled it. I'm going to take out these little support skewers. I started this one again on April 10th. 6 days later was the first transplant. All right, so we are gonna see what happens if we turn this baby upside down. Check out the roots. It's a little bit on the dry side, that's okay. Get this baby in the hole. Well, that's staying together really nicely for me. And I'm going to backfill. I always feel this insane sense of urgency when I'm at this stage, like I need to get this backfilled as quickly as possible. Something horrible will happen. My plant is leaning over. Get these skewers back in here because this leggy plant does need it. But otherwise, boy, I would say that went pretty smooth. Put our tag back in. There you have it. We transplanted to a 5-gallon pot. We'll bring that plant back outside for the night. We'll add its friend, the 1800 Skinner. We're going to put that one in a bigger pot too. We'll bring them back out both to the hoop house. And if things go well, we'll join 2 more to the group tomorrow night. I need to free up more space for my grow lights upstairs because each round of my plants are getting bigger and bigger, and it's time to move on to the next phase in life. So thank you for joining me, and feel free to give me any comments, criticisms, critiques, or cheer me on. Thank you.